you ever lost someone because you were too honest, too cold, too critical, too honest for your own good? If that sounds familiar, chances are you're a Virgo. And if you're not, but you've ever been crushed by a Virgo's silence, precision, or brutal honesty, stay with me. Because this isn't just personality. This is power misunderstood. People love to say Virgos are too much, too analytical, too serious, too detail-obsessed. But here's the truth. Virgos aren't trying to impress you. They're trying to improve everything, including you. This video isn't here to defend Virgos or bash them. It's here to explain why people often get Virgo completely wrong and why that misunderstanding turns into fear, resistance, even resentment. Virgos are the mirror, the one that doesn't flatter. They won't lie to make you feel good, but they will quietly note everything, every flaw, every habit, every contradiction. And when they finally speak up, it cuts deep, not because it's cruel, but because it's true. Let's unpack that uncomfortable magic. The problem isn't that Virgos are bad people. The problem is they're too good at seeing what most people are trying to hide. Most people don't want honest feedback. They want reassurance. They want someone to nod, smile, and pretend everything's fine. Virgos can't do that. Their brains won't let them. So what happens when someone walks into your life and without saying a word makes you feel exposed? You get defensive. You label them as cold, judgmental, even toxic. But in truth, you're reacting to your own discomfort. Virgo just happens to be the trigger. So here's a real question. Have you ever walked away from a Virgo? Not because they were wrong, but because they were right. Drop a comment if you've ever been on that side of the truth. Let's talk about Virgo's obsession with perfection, because it's real and it's intense. But let's clear something up. It's not about being the best to show off or win a gold star. For a Virgo, it's about doing things right. Because deep down, they believe that details matter. And when details are messy, it's a sign of deeper chaos. So yeah, they'll fix your spreadsheet, point out the typo in your presentation, and rearrange the dishwasher after you've already loaded it. Not to control you, but because they can't turn it off. I once worked on a group project where our Virgo teammate rewrote the whole report the night before submission, not to make us look bad, but because they found too many logical gaps. And you know what? We got the highest score in the class. Did everyone appreciate it? No, but we all benefited from it, whether we admitted it or not. That's the thing with Virgo energy, it pushes everything forward. Whether people like it or not, their standards are high, sometimes impossibly high. And while it can feel like judgment, most of the time it's actually deep care in disguise. A Virgo doesn't criticize to hurt. They offer correction because they genuinely want things and people to reach their full potential. Have you ever been disliked for simply doing something too well? Or had someone push you away just because your standards made them uncomfortable? Tell us your Virgo moment, the time you tried to help and got labeled difficult for it. But here's where it gets tricky. If you're not ready to be challenged, if you take things personally, you're going to feel attacked. And that's when resentment builds. It's not uncommon for friends or coworkers to feel drained around a Virgo. Not because Virgos are mean, but because they never stop striving and expect you to do the same. This constant drive for better can create a gap between Virgo and others. They often feel isolated, wondering why people don't match their energy or why they're being labeled as harsh. And this misunderstanding becomes a wound, one they rarely talk about. Now let's shift gears to another side of Virgo that often gets overlooked: their silence. Virgos aren't loud. They don't need to dominate conversations or spotlight their achievements. In fact, they often sit back, observe, and speak only when they feel their words will add value. But that quiet presence, it can feel intimidating. I've seen it time and time again. A Virgo walks into a room and doesn't say much, and suddenly people start whispering, thinking they're being judged. In reality, the Virgo is probably scanning the environment, taking in everything, making mental notes, not because they're secretly cruel, but because their brain just works that way. They absorb everything. This silence can be misinterpreted. Someone might think, why didn't they smile? Why didn't they say hi? Do they hate me? But really, the Virgo is just deep in thought, maybe overanalyzing whether they should have said something first. It's a whole internal process that no one sees. Have you misread a Virgo's silence before? Share what you thought versus what it really meant. And then there's the feedback thing. Virgos aren't the type to throw compliments around like confetti. If they say you did a good job, they mean it. But because praise is rare, people can feel underappreciated or even invisible. This creates a disconnect. People want emotional warmth, while Virgos offer practical improvements. But here's the educational piece: there's value in both. We need people who can lift our spirits, sure, but we also need people who help us grow. Virgo teaches us how to look closer, dig deeper, and never settle for surface-level comfort. That's a rare kind of love, the kind that builds character. So if you're close to a Virgo, learn to read their silence. Look for the effort they put into what they do, even if they don't say a word. And if you are a Virgo, maybe it's time to find softer ways to share your truth. Not less truth, just a warmer delivery. Virgo doesn't need to become someone else. They just need the world to understand that their pursuit of excellence comes from a place of deep integrity. And maybe, just maybe, if more of us adopted a little bit of that Virgo precision, we'd all raise the standard. Let's not forget how Virgos often end up in leadership roles without even asking for it. Why? Because people eventually realize, consciously or not, that when a Virgo is in charge, things get done right. They might not be the warmest person in the room, but they're the one who'll stay up late fixing the details no one else noticed. They're the person who brings extra pens to the meeting because they know someone will forget. They're the person who'll remember your coffee order, not because they want your approval, but because it's simply the thoughtful thing to do. Another example, my cousin is a Virgo, and he once helped organize a community fundraiser. While others were posting on social media and creating excitement, he quietly handled logistics, double-checked the donation accounts, and made sure no cent was unaccounted for. At the end of the event, people were hugging the loudest organizers, but when they realized the event ran flawlessly because of his behind-the-scenes effort, the respect was undeniable. That's the essence of Virgo. They don't seek applause. They seek precision. They care about the outcome, not the attention. And if you really think about it, that's the kind of person you want in your corner when life gets messy. On the flip side, Virgo's silence also extends to their emotions. They often struggle to ask for help because they think it's their job to hold everything together. This creates emotional bottlenecks. You might think they're distant or uncaring, when in reality they're overwhelmed but won't admit it. They've learned to carry burdens in silence, and this is where we all need to take something from their playbook but also help rewrite it. Yes, we should strive to be dependable and organized, but we should also normalize emotional expression even for Virgos, especially for them, because behind all that competence, there's a heart that quietly hopes to be seen, not just respected. The educational lesson here is mutual understanding. We need to learn how to speak each other's languages. For Virgo, it's acts of service, thoughtful criticism, quiet loyalty. For others, it might be verbal affirmation or emotional openness. The goal isn't to change each other, but to meet in the middle. So next time you find yourself frustrated with a Virgo's tone or silence, ask yourself, are they being cold? Or are they simply being honest? And if you're a Virgo, consider this: what could happen if you shared not just your thoughts, but your feelings too. Growth goes both ways, and that's what makes the Virgo journey and their impact on us so unforgettable. Let's get into one of the most misunderstood parts of Virgo energy. Their memory. Not the kind of memory where they recall trivia facts or your birthday, though they usually do that too, but the emotional memory. Virgos don't forget when you mess up, not because they want to hold it over your head, but because they see every moment as a pattern, a data point, a lesson. So if you break their trust once, they log it. If you lie, if you disappoint, if you let them down, it gets saved, emotionally stamped. Emotionally. I once had a friend, a Virgo, who kept track of every time someone said they'd show up and didn't. She never brought it up in a fight, never made a scene. But one day, she just stopped inviting them. To her, the pattern was clear. She didn't hate them. She just adjusted her expectations. That's the quiet pain of a Virgo. They believe people can do better. And when that belief is broken enough times, they don't explode, they retreat. They protect themselves by removing access. And once they close that But here's where the learning moment comes in. If you're in a relationship with a Virgo, romantic, family, or professional, consistency matters more than grand gestures. Show up. Be accountable. Keep your promises. Because while they might not say it out loud, they're always paying attention. And your reliability or lack of it shapes the entire foundation of their trust. Now flip the script. If you're a Virgo, here's the hard truth. People make mistakes. A lot. And not everyone learns on the first try. So while it's noble to hold high standards, it's also powerful to practice forgiveness, not for their sake, but for your own peace. Holding on to every error is like carrying pebbles in your pocket. One or two is fine, but after a while, it weighs you down. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to let some of it go. Now let's talk emotions, or more specifically, Virgo's way of handling them. You see, Virgos don't wear their hearts on their sleeves. They wear armor made of logic, planning, and control. They process emotions like a checklist. Is this feeling rational? Is it productive? Can I do anything with it if not? They shelve it, and the problem is feelings don't like being shelved. This emotional suppression often makes Virgo come across as cold or distant, when the truth is, they feel things deeply, they just don't show it. They don't cry at the drop of a hat. They don't gush. They don't make big emotional declarations. But when they care, it's real. It's subtle. It's in the way they fix your broken chair without telling you. Or remember how you take your coffee. Or quietly worry when you're sick and check in by sending articles about your symptoms. One of my favorite examples is a Virgo mom I know. She never says I love you out loud, but she packs perfectly portioned lunches for her kids every morning, writes their names in neat handwriting on everything, and never forgets a single school form. Her love is administrative, precise, and unwavering. But the problem is not everyone speaks that love language. Some people need words. They need affection. They need visible emotion. And when they don't get it from Virgo, they assume it's not there. This creates a lot of heartbreak. Virgo feels like they're giving everything. The other person feels neglected. And the worst part, neither of them is wrong. They're just missing each other's signals. That's why communication is everything. If you love a Virgo, learn to see their quiet acts of care. Don't wait for a grand speech, look for the tiny details. And if you are a Virgo, learn to voice what you feel, even if it's awkward, even if it feels unnecessary. Because sometimes, just saying I miss you or I'm proud of you can change everything. We all have emotional armor. Virgos just happens to be made of spreadsheets and routines. But underneath that structure is a heart that's loyal, thoughtful, and incredibly soft once you earn your way in. If you're loving a Virgo in silence, tell them, or tag them below. Sometimes the quietest people feel the most. Comment if you relate. At the end of the day, Virgo teaches us a lot about excellence, about standards, about care that's practical and precise. But they also have their lessons to learn about emotional vulnerability, about release, about grace. Because true growth isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Let me tell you a story about a Virgo boss I once worked with. She was incredibly efficient, organized down to the minute, never raised her voice, never flattered anyone. But when she gave you a compliment, it stayed with you. I remember she once said to me, "You handled that crisis well." That one sentence meant more than any Employee of the Month award. But here's the twist. She also kept a mental notebook of every missed deadline, not to punish anyone, but to protect the flow of the team. If someone dropped the ball twice, she restructured the workflow. She didn't hold grudges, she just adjusted the system. To her, that was logical. But to the person removed from the task, it felt cold, even cruel. This is what happens when Virgo logic meets emotional reality. They often don't realize how their corrections land, because to them, fixing something is love. Adjusting a process is loyalty. Creating structure is how they show they care. And it's not just in the workplace. In relationships, Virgos often become the emotional engineers. They're the ones asking, how can we make this work better? What are the practical next steps? But sometimes, people just want to be heard, not fixed. And this is where Virgo needs to grow. Listening without solving, holding space without trying to repair. Here's a takeaway for anyone close to a Virgo if they're offering feedback. It's because they care. If they're quiet, it's not always distance, it might be processing. And if they're acting overly responsible, it could be that they're silently carrying more than they should. And to Virgos, you don't always have to hold it all. You're allowed to soften. You're allowed to lean on others. You're allowed to be messy sometimes, not because you failed, but because you're human. At their best, Virgos are quiet heroes, and the world needs more of those. Let's be honest, living authentically sounds great on paper, but in real life it can make people uncomfortable. And no one embodies this more than Virgo. Virgos have this unapologetic way of just being real. They don't sugarcoat. They don't fake small talk. They don't pretend to like something just to blend in. And while that sounds admirable, let's be real, it doesn't always make them the most popular person in the room. People say they want the truth, but what they usually mean is they want a versi. I remember working with a Virgo woman who once told our client, straight-faced, that their branding was outdated and unoriginal in a room full of people who had just praised it 5 minutes earlier. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. But you know what happened next. The client rebranded and their business doubled in 6 months. Truth stings, but it works. Virgos don't say what you want to hear. They say what you need to hear. That's a superpower, but it's also a curse, because not everyone is ready for that level of honesty. Some people feel exposed, others feel judged, and a lot of people just avoid the Virgo altogether. It's the same in friendships and relationships. Virgos won't flatter you just to keep you around. If you're being reckless with your health, finances, or emotions, they'll tell you, not with malice, but with concern. And depending on where you are in your life, that might either feel like love or an attack. But the real key is intention. Virgo's intention is almost always rooted in care. They want to see you win. They want to help you fix the holes in your plan. They want to make things better. It's just that their delivery is wrapped in logic, not empathy, and that's where miscommunication starts. This is where both sides have something to learn. For those dealing with Virgos, try to see past the tone and hear the content. Ask yourself, are they being critical or are they being constructive? And for Virgos, your truth is powerful, but it doesn't have to cut. You can soften your edges without dulling your message. Here's an example. A Virgo friend once told me that my business plan had no clear customer journey. It hurt. I was defensive. But when I calmed down and looked at the plan again, they were right. Their comment saved me months of struggle. And yes, I told them thank you. Eventually. So yes, being around a Virgo can feel like standing under a bright light. Every flaw, every inconsistency, every shortcut gets noticed. But instead of shrinking from that, what if we leaned into it? What if we saw that as an opportunity for growth? Because here's the thing, the world is full of people who tell you what you want to hear, but very few who will hold up a mirror and help you see what you're missing. Virgo is the mirror, and while that reflection might sting, it's the first step toward real transformation. In a way, Virgo is the coach who pushes you harder than anyone else, not because they're mean, but because they see what you're capable of. They want more for you, even when you're okay with less. That kind of tough love doesn't always come with hugs or validation. Sometimes it comes in the form of uncomfortable truths, high expectations, or silent disappointment. But if you look closer, if you really pay attention, it's love, it's care, it's respect. Now, that doesn't mean Virgos are perfect. Sometimes they judge too quickly. Sometimes their delivery is too sharp. Sometimes they struggle to understand that not everyone moves at their pace or sees the world through the same hypercritical lens. But here's the beauty of it all. Virgos aren't asking for perfection from others that they don't demand from themselves. They're just trying to live honestly, hold themselves accountable, and make everything around them better. And yeah, sometimes that makes them hard to handle, but it also makes them invaluable. So what's the lesson here if you're not a Virgo? Take a breath next time one challenges you. Consider that their discomforting honesty might be the exact medicine you need. And if you are a Virgo, remember that timing, tone, and tenderness can make your truth easier to receive. There's room in the world for your brilliance, for your clarity, for your high standards. But there's also room for compassion, for patience, for emotional nuance. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can be both sharp and soft, honest and kind, real and gentle. That balance, that's where your power truly lives. Think about your own life. Have you ever had someone who didn't just hype you up, but actually helped you level up, someone who pointed out your blind spots, not to tear you down, but to make you better? That's Virgo. They don't clap for chaos. They won't co-sign your drama, but they'll stay up helping you fix a resume, rewrite an email, or talk through your finances. Virgos operate on the frequency of alignment. If your life is out of sync, if your choices don't match your goals, they will notice. They can't help it. And sometimes, their honesty exposes what you've been trying to ignore. That can be uncomfortable, but it can also be liberating. Another friend of mine told me her Virgo sister once stopped mid-conversation and said, "You're not happy, why are you pretending you are?" It was blunt. It was jarring, but it opened a door to the most honest conversation she had had in years. It's that kind of insight, raw but transformative, that defines Virgo's role in many people's lives. And let's be real, in a world full of performative positivity, we need people who are brave enough to cut through the noise, people who call things out, who name the problem, who push for better not out of ego, but out of love. That's Virgo. So if you've ever felt misunderstood for being too honest, too blunt, or too intense, maybe you're not the problem. Maybe you're just wired like a Virgo. And maybe the world needs more of that, with just a little more warmth to balance it all out. There comes a moment in every relationship with a Virgo when things get real. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it hits harder than any argument ever could. It's that one conversation where they calmly lay out every single thing you've done wrong, with dates, times, and examples. It's clinical, it's precise, and it's unforgettable. You don't see it coming, because Virgos usually hold it in for a long time. They give you room to improve. They wait. They give subtle hints. But when it reaches a tippy, the thing is, Virgos don't unleash all that truth to hurt you. They do it because they feel like they've exhausted every other option. They've been patient. They've tried to fix things behind the scenes. But when it gets to that point, they need to be heard fully, clearly, without filters. That moment can change everything. It can break a relationship or rebuild it from the ground up. And what determines the outcome isn't just what the Virgo says, but how the other person responds. Can you handle the tea? If you've ever been on the receiving end of a Virgo truth bomb, you know it's not easy. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what you needed to hear. Because after the sting wears off, what's left is clarity, direction, a clean slate. In the end, Virgo doesn't speak to destroy, they speak to rebuild. And in a world full of confusion, that kind of honesty is a rare gift. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Virgo teaches us that love isn't always loud. It's not always sugar-coated or wrapped in a warm hug. Sometimes, love shows up as accountability, as tough conversations, as the friend who tells you what no one else will. But Virgo also has their own growth edge. They're learning to balance truth with tenderness, to express emotion without feeling weak, to allow for mistakes in others and in themselves. So whether you're a Virgo or you love one, let this be your reminder. You don't have to be perfect to be worthy of connection. You just have to be real, honest, intentional. So, are Virgos hard to love or just hard to fake it with? Share this with someone who's misunderstood or someone who is the Virgo mirror in your life. Now I want to hear from you. What's your sign? Have you ever had a Virgo completely change your life with one honest sentence? Or maybe you are the Virgo, always caught between truth and tact. Either way, share your story in the comments. Let's learn from each other, one truth at a time. Think about it, how many people in your life actually tell you the truth? Even when it's uncomfortable, most will dance around it, hoping to keep the peace. But not Virgo. They'll look you in the eye and say the thing you've been avoiding. And yes, that can feel like a punch in the gut. But sometimes, that punch is exactly what shakes you awake. I've heard so many stories where a Virgo friend, sibling, or partner became the catalyst for major life change. One woman told me her Virgo roommate pointed a. It's also important to acknowledge Virgo's emotional growth. Many are learning to pause before speaking, to ask themselves, is this the right time? Am I being kind in my truth? That self-awareness doesn't come easily for them. But when it does, it transforms the way they connect. And for everyone else, the invitation is this. Don't run from Virgo energy. Learn to sit with it. Learn to appreciate the rare gift of someone who's rooting for you in the most honest way possible. Because when a Virgo is on that's what this video is all about. Understanding Virgo beyond the stereotypes, seeing the value in their intensity, their honesty, their constant striving, and recognizing that while it might be hard to handle, it's also what makes them unforgettable. So if this message hits home, let it sink in. And then share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been misunderstood, someone who's been labeled too much, too intense, too direct. They just might be a Virgo, or someone brave enough to love like one.